Welcome to the Plant Spirit Podcast on connecting with plant consciousness and the healing wisdom of nature. I'm your host, Sara Artemisia, and my guest today is Lupo Passero. Lupo is the Herbalist Director of Twin Star Herbal Education and Community Apothecary, and she brings over 20 years of knowledge, intimate relationship, and understanding of the plants and essences, and she pairs this with a deep appreciation for the healing connection between the mind, body, and spirit. So Lupo, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really pleased to be here.
I just love your connection with the plants, and I'm excited for our conversation on what it means to be a green witch today. So I'd love to just dive in there with that. And I would love to hear from your perspective and experience. What does it mean to be an herbal or green witch?
I was thinking about that earlier on my way home, and there's so many different variations that anyone could come up with as far as being an herbal witch or a green witch. And I thought to myself, well, why don't I look up and see what the dictionary has to say? So I just looked in the Merriam-Webster dictionary under the word witch just to see what the definition was. And there was two that came up. And I feel like this is a really beautiful analogy for the story of witches. The first is a person, and especially a woman, believed to have magic powers. Plain and simple, right? The second is an ugly or mean old woman. And I thought that was so interesting that one of them is really just about the feminine power of holding magic, and the other is about being ugly or mean. And so these are two totally different dichotomies. I want to preface this by saying anybody of any gender or however they associate can be a witch. This is just what the dictionary had to say. So I like the first definition quite a bit. It's just about being able to harness our own power. And to be a green witch or to be an herbal witch is to be able to harness that power of the plants via ourselves and also with spirit as a conduit, and building a spiritual relationship with the healing power of plants that's really based in reverence and respect for not only just the people that we're treating, but also the plants, the animals, and the environment. And I think that the original witches were just that. They were herbalists, and they knew how to work with the power of the plants. And they paid attention to the stars and the sun and the moon and the seasons, and did everything with great reverence and respect, because it was such a gift to have healing herbs. And it was such a miracle to be able to save somebody's life. And it was such a beautiful opportunity to work with the plants each and every day. And so the green witch, or the herbal witch, in my opinion, is a plant loving person who also can tap into their own personal power and pair that with the plants to create magic.
Love that. Yes, totally agree. And I'm curious to hear how this path evolved for you.
I was thinking about that today as well. You know, I was raised by an Italian grandmother who came over from the countryside of Italy when she was a young woman. And I would imagine some would call her a strega or a witch, because she knew how to work with the plants, and she knew which plants you could use for food and which plants you could use for medicine. All of us have that in our lineage somewhere, no matter who we are or where we come from. All of us can go back to having a witch in the family, is someone who knew how to work with the plants. And so I think that's the beginning for us all. For me, it definitely came through falling in love with crystals and energy, even before I fell in love with plants, when I was 13 and 14, and first started learning about crystals and was able to look them up and learn more about them and read books about them. That was really exciting to me, that we had these beautiful, amazing stones that held all of this energy inside of them. And when I was really young, we used to gather around in the woods behind my house, and I used to create these magical fairy forests, and we used to hold hands without being ever led or taught this by anybody else. And we used to share energy with each other. Whoever in the circle wanted energy, we would just hold hands and send each other good energy. And that was my first practice of sitting in circle and just noticing what happens if everybody sends positive energy to one person and how they're able to receive it. And that was not taught. That was just kind of something we stumbled upon, probably just because we remembered it in our DNA somewhere along the line. And then as I got a little bit older, I went to my first like moon circle with 20 women or so in the Appalachian Mountains at my dear friend Sara Foley's house. She has the Appalachian School of Holistic Herbalism in Asheville, but this was many moons ago. I was maybe 18. And I was invited to a moon circle, and I showed up to this cabin in the middle of the night on this dark moon. There was no lights. And I walked into this room full of women with just candles sitting in circle. And as soon as I walked in, I was like, oh, this is home. This is what we're supposed to be doing. This is what feels really good to me. And from there, it just kept going. We just kept circling with other women and playing with energy and playing with the plants and learning more about the stones and the crystals, and always coming from a place of gratitude, love, and respect, and never in a place of trying to control or manipulate. To be quite honest with you, that's a little bit scary to me. And so for me, it was always about learning to work with these energies that could help support us on our journey through protection and really love. And then it just kind of spiraled. And I think my relationship with the plants was really based in that same spiritual concept. And so the plants started like speaking to me and through me. And yeah. And then next thing you know, here I am 25 years later talking to you about what it is to be an herbal or green witch.
Love that. So great. Yeah. The part you were just talking about too, about how we all have plant people in our lineage. I really feel that, like any of us anywhere on the earth, we go back far enough. Some it's currently still happening in that unbroken lineage. And for others, through colonization, we've had a severance of that. And so if we go back far enough, we can find that connection with the plant people of our DNA. And it feels connected to this other thing you were just sharing about this experience of remembrance, how you had this embodied remembrance as a kid, or this circle of friends that you had. You all just instinctively knew what to do, when someone needs support or healing energetically, that there's some simple practices that we can do to really support that. And the other thing too, that feels so important that you just shared, is coming from a space of gratitude, love, and respect in working with the plants. And particularly when we are diving into these more magical realms of working with energy, that feels so important to me. That is one of my core values, and something that I feel very fiercely, strongly about, that it's so important to come from that place, that pure place of the integrity and the gratitude and respect with the plants. And I was wondering if you could just tell us a bit more about that in your experience, maybe if there's a story that comes to mind, or even just an approach of like, what does that mean to really approach working with plants in a magical way from this space of reverence and reciprocity?
Yeah, the story that comes to mind doesn't really have much to do with plants, but it's the first thing that popped into my head. When my children were young, and I was like all mothers, or at least the way that I was a nervous mother. I had these young little beings out in the world, and I used to always surround them in a ball of like light. If anytime I got nervous about them, or they went to kindergarten for the first time, or they were sick, I would just surround them with this bubble of light. And sometimes I'll surround them with like plants instead, using something like yarrow, or somebody will come into the apothecary and share their story with me. And in my mind's eye, I'm like envisioning their heart being filled with borage. And so it's like this way of using energy and your own imagination to be able to create a positive space to hold safety, protection, and to counterbalance, I suppose, negative feelings and negative hurt. And I did a class years ago with Pam Montgomery, Plant Spirit Healing class, and it was about 10 years ago. And she's one of my most beloved teachers, and I love her to death. And she's a tough teacher, though. She's a tough love teacher. And she called me on the phone and she said, "Why do you want to study with me? You've already been doing this work for 10 years. And how come you want to study with me?" And I said, "Well, you're one of my elders, and I look up to you, and I feel like I have so much to learn." And she said, okay, well, you can come and apprentice with me. So I did. And one of the things that I learned about with her was how to work on the energy body of a sick person or a hurting person or somebody who's suffering, and how to offer plant medicine spiritually. And so had somebody laying down on the ground, and we were working on their heart chakra and filling their heart with the essence of hawthorn. But that had been something I'd been doing all along. I just never spoke it out loud to anyone. I am trained in Reiki and such, and I think it's a really beautiful modality, but it's not something that I utilize that often. Like if someone's hurting or in need of help, I'm oftentimes like sending the energy of the plant, or sometimes a color, or just whatever comes to me that seems appropriate for them, into them energetically, obviously with consent and, with nothing but love and goodness. And so that, to me, like that plant spirit healing aspect, energetic aspect, or somebody who's doing this really profound work with like Reiki and energy healing, and then bringing the plants into that. I mean, it just ups the ante like tenfold. It's really exciting to pair those two things together. And at the end of the day, it's all just energy. We're energy. The plants are energy. The energy that we're creating within ourselves is just energy. And then like how they merge and dance together is a very unique thing. So for me, that's the main way that I work with the plants. Or sometimes someone will walk in the door and a plant will come with them. Like in my mind's eye, I'll see a plant and they'll start telling their story. And I already know the plant that they need because it came with them. And a big piece of that is the trust. That's really like the hardest part of this whole thing, is to really trust yourself and not think, am I going crazy? I hear people ask that all the time. Like, I feel like I'm going crazy. All of these things are showing up. And I'm like, well, what if you just trust them, And especially if they're positive and beautiful, and you don't necessarily have to act on it. I didn't right away when I was a young baby witch. I didn't act on it right away, but I would go home and look that plant up. And then I would get confirmation that story that person just told me, and that plant, the essence of that plant, would pair perfectly together. And I did that long enough for me to really begin to feel trust within myself and within what was showing up for me.
Amazing. I love that you so often will see the plant coming in with the person. Well, actually, before that, the other thing that you just shared too, that I just absolutely love, is this thing of how anything that we bring the plants into, it immediately amplifies the vibration essentially of it, which I feel that so strongly. Literally any realm of life we bring plants in, the vibration of that experience is immediately going to increase. And when you think about pairing that with energy healing, recognizing that the plants are such powerful energy healers, they're so aligned with their way of unfolding, or the different, like you mentioned, the hawthorn, and of course, absolutely love Pam's work. She's absolutely incredible. But these different, or borage, how there are these different types of ways that the plants can work with us to support healing. And I'm curious to hear, how do you perceive that? Like when someone walks in and you just see a plant, do you actually see the plant behind them, or do you just get more of like a sense feel of, oh, borage is here kind of a thing?
Yeah, it's more like borage is here. It like pops in my head, but it's not really a visual as much as it's like a feeling. And yeah, it's not really a visual. It's not like somebody walks in and like sunflowers like dancing behind them. Certainly not in the 3D, and not really in a visual way for me. It's just, I don't know how to explain it. It's just more energetic. It just pops in my head. Or somebody will come into the apothecary and we'll be talking about, their migraines. And as they're talking, plants are just like popping in my head, or they're talking about their emotions or loss and grief. So I don't see them as much as I feel them. And like, I don't necessarily hear audibly the word, but I don't know. The plant it's just there.
Yeah.
See it in my mind's eye, I suppose.
Awesome. Yeah, that's amazing. And that it feels so connected to that part that you were just talking about with the trust. How I think oftentimes people at the beginning of really deepening in the relationship, into the intuitive healing relationship with plants, that doubt that can come up that you were talking about, sometimes people can feel like, oh, well, I didn't, see it. I didn't, as if it was a movie in broad daylight. So it must not be real. But just recognizing that there are so many intuitive ways to be connected with the plants, and that it's important for each of us to honor what are the ways that come most naturally to us, because those are the ways that we will be able to hear the plants most clearly. So to not shut down what our innate intuitive gifts actually are, but to listen and notice, like, what are the ways that I actually receive information, and then hone in on those, like really listen. How is the message coming through? How is the information coming through?
Yeah. And then knowing that that's your vehicle, our personal vehicle, my personal vehicle. That's what happens for me. For somebody else, it happens differently. Like there's people that like to use pendulums, or they like to do kinesiology, or they like to pull divination cards. And there's all sorts of different ways to work with this energy. Finding what like fits us is what's most important. And it's unique for each person. And I really want to share that I work with children a lot, and well, not as much as I'd like to, but when I do, I'm always like, okay, we're going to go listen to the plants. And they're so funny. They'll like put their ears right up to a flower and they'll be like, I can't hear it. And I'm like, it's because we're supposed to listen with our heart. That's always my answer to them. I'm like, our heart is what we need to listen to. We need to feel what they're saying. You'll hear it, but you'll hear it inside of your head. And I just want to add when we were just going back and forth about the trust piece. Part of the reason why I think that that's so complicated or difficult for many of us to just really trust is, one, most of us were not taught to trust our own intuition. But the second piece is, as we were speaking about in the beginning, that all of us have an ancestry of healers and witches, or whatever word feels good for people. And we have this lineage in our bloodline of healers. We also likely, all of us, have some type of persecution around that in our history as well. And one of the things that is often referred to in this realm is called the witch wound. And it could have been that an ancestor just a few generations back, or not even that far back, was persecuted in some way or another, because we have had mass persecution around the power of our own humanity from the very beginning, and it's still happening to this day. And so that comes down our DNA line as well. Not just like we know that the positive comes, but also some of the trauma stays. And we've been able to prove that with epigenetics. And so sometimes there's a block there because there was something that happened a few generations back that was really awful, because witches have been persecuted from the beginning of time and still are to this day, right now on this planet. And there's places in the world. I just got back from spending time in San Cristobal and Chiapas, Mexico, and the midwives there, if the babies die, the midwives are held accountable and accused of witchcraft if there's a stillborn or something happens to the baby. And so they're still very much alive on this planet, the concept that witches are bad or witches are evil. And then we've had, beginning in the 11th century with the Great Inquisition in Europe, like we had 800 years of severe persecution. And so that trust, it makes sense that there might be a little fear around trusting that, because it wasn't safe at some point. And it really changed the trajectory of us owning our own power. And without getting too political, I'm just going to say that all happened purposefully, so that we were disempowered. And it's okay to baby step our way back into finding our own personal power again. We spoke about this earlier, you and I, before we began our chat. Like, the word witch for a lot of people could be a triggering word. You don't have to use that word if it doesn't feel good to you. For me, it's been the last 5 or 6 years or so that I've really started using that word at Twin Star and within my work and out in social media, because I want to reclaim it as the truth of what it is a healer, somebody that understands how to work with the plants and their own personal power. But if that word's triggering, we use a different word, and there's ways to just sort of baby step around the fear, or at least acknowledge and be aware of the fear. And that will help us build a greater trust in what's happened, or what is happening within us.
Yeah. So important, so powerful, that aspect of reclaiming the word witch. It feels really relevant to the current circumstances of the planet, and also just how people are still to this day being persecuted for being plant healers and midwives. And that is not even for many people, even way, way far back in the lineage. I'm curious, in your experience, are there any, well, there certainly are. What flower essences do you work with or have come to mind for you that can support potentially releasing some of that old trauma? Because so much of it's embedded in our cells. It's not cognitively remembered trauma. It's just that there may be, like you said, which could be a triggering word for people. And maybe because somewhere in our cellular memory that is embedded, that is something scary instead of something really beautiful and powerful to be connected with.
Yeah, there's a few different ones that come to mind. The first essence that comes up for me whenever it comes to trauma is always going to be Star of Bethlehem. It's such a beautiful essence, and it's really the essence of peace. And it's the essence, in my opinion, of just that blinding white healing light. And it's also, in my opinion, the essence of Christ consciousness, which is the truth of love and light before the persecution. And if that sits with people well, that's great. And if not, that's okay too. But for me, it's like that God, goddess, like true energy, like that white light that can just like heal and soothe anything and bring us back into a place of inner peace. And it can heal trauma that happened 10 minutes ago, and it could heal trauma that happened 10 decades ago, or generations ago, if we're focused on it and asking Star of Bethlehem to heal that piece. And Dr. Bach called Star of Bethlehem the great comforter. I always think of like being able to like shower yourself, like wrap yourself in this blanket, but of just like white divine light. And so that's one of them that is like, talk about me. You say, how do they pop in your head? I just like Star of Bethlehem's like, hey, hello. But the other two are Black Cohosh, which I'm sure it's nearly impossible at this point for me to get through any conversation with anyone without talking about Black Cohosh. I took Black Cohosh before we started this conversation. She is my queen. I think she is one of the greatest plants on the planet. And it would be the essence that we would be talking about. She is an at-risk plant. So it's the flower essence that can be sustainably made and worked with. And she's really great at helping us transition dark, stagnant energies, like untwisting and unfurling things and allowing it to like spiral up into like love and light, like undoing like sticky things and gnarly things. That's what the word cohosh means, gnarly. So if there was some stuck energy, hurt energy, things that have been like passed on, like Black cohosh she just moves it out. She's blooming in my front yard right now. And every night I go and take pictures of her, and I call her the queen of the night because these white flowers basically glow in the dark. Like it's like a new moon, and you can still see these white flowers growing. So it's that light within the darkness piece. And then the last one that popped in was Ghost Pipe. And Ghost Pipe's another one that is certainly not something that we want to go out and harvest. It's on the at-risk list of United Plant Savers. It's big, big, big medicine. But there are folks out there ethically making the flower essences of it. This is a big one, though. This is the one that, like, I feel like helps us dance between realms a little bit and helps to heal the things that are kind of stuck between the veil. And also an essence I took before I started talking. So they're all probably like, just talk about me. There's a lot of reverence and respect that goes into working with that plant. It's unlike any other. It doesn't fit into any kingdom, and it's not quite a plant. It's not quite a fungi. It's just an anomaly, and it's clearly a spirit plant. So that is one that I think could be quite helpful as well. But again, as a flower essence, only sustainably, and then maybe working with a experienced practitioner if you're going to go down that road, because that's the big medicine.
I love how you are so connected with that aspect of the safety piece of, when we're doing this big healing work, it's so important to be doing it in a good way with a really safely held container, because that real stuff's going to come up. Like it is going to come up. And particularly when we're talking about healing these really deep, old, potentially really ancient wounds, this can be really, really supportive. So I'd love to hear too more about, for folks who are in the process of really discovering or coming into their own power of being a green witch, how, in your experience, can people really strengthen that? Can they strengthen their own power of recognizing or becoming a green witch?
I think that the first piece of advice that I would offer there is to just stay within our own integrity at all times, and recognizing that this is something that takes a lifetime to even begin to understand, and that baby steps are okay, and to not do anything outside of your comfort zone, not speak outside of your own truth, like working on your own experience, like go outside and sit with Star of Bethlehem and see what comes up for you, and then speak to that as you're sharing with others, as opposed to like reading a book and somebody else is experiencing experience and then regurgitating it, and really wanting to claim, this word witch, which doesn't necessarily need to be claimed. It's like being an herbalist as well. It's like you kind of come into this place where within yourself and your own integrity that you've had enough training, you have enough understanding, and you can speak from your own experience and not from other people's. And I think that our modern day world with, social media, and it's like really easy to become like an insta witch and like grab a crystal and grab some smudge, and then all of a sudden you're like telling everybody that you're a witch. And it is exciting, and I love seeing young people claiming this. It's really very exciting. I mean, when I was that age, there's no way I could have claimed that without persecution from my community. And so it's really exciting, but also like staying in our lanes, like learning as we go, trusting what shows up for us, trusting our own experience, bringing it back to ourselves, and knowing that each one of us is so uniquely perfect. And the way that spirit, plants, healing, humanity, our own interactions with nature shows up is just as it's meant to be for us, and not to step too far outside of that. And then also like listening to our elders, like really asking the folks that have had years of experience of working with the plants or working with magic, paying attention to who you respect and whose energy feels good to you, and asking them questions, and not being afraid to ask for guidance, because we've never really, this is like the wild, wild west. Back in the day, people were always trained. They were trained by the medicine person of the village. And some young child was seen at an early age as being quite special because of the way that they interacted with their environment. And then that child was trained throughout their lifetime to get to this stage of being a medicine person. And we don't have that, at least here in the West, that much anymore. And so recognizing that, like, it's okay to ask, and also remembering that the plants in many ways are the elders, because a lot of our elders weren't allowed to talk about this stuff anymore. And so much has been taken away from the last few generations of folks and their relationship with nature. The plants hold those memories. So that may be who folks just need to return to, is just directly to the oak tree, or to the linden tree, or to the elder tree, and asking source, to help guide. But baby steps, and trusting your own intuition, and staying within your own personal power, and also only doing things from a space of love, light, appreciation, and gratitude. I don't personally dabble with the darker aspects of witchcraft. I don't do hexes. I don't ever ask for anything but love and light. I believe with my entire being that anything that you put out there can return to you threefold, if not more. And so that it's really important to pay attention to our intention as well, how we use our languaging, conscious languaging, how we say things, how we ask for things. And that in it of itself is a lot of work of learning how to reframe our languaging and our prayers. Yeah, I think that's enough for a place to start.
Incredible. Man, so much in there. So much in there. Listening to our elders, listening to our human elders and our plant elders. And, I know we've talked about this before, but the value of apprenticing for a long time with the plants, and how Black Cohosh even shows us this in her very multi-year germination period, that there's this incredible value in apprenticing for a long time with the plants before moving into that external expression of it, in a sense, because that is the way of the plants. Like, that is the way of really integrating that knowledge on the inside so that you know it with the core of yourself, and to speak from that place of, like you shared, to speak from that place of your integrity, from your core, not just reading a book and regurgitating what you heard, but what is your direct experience with, the oak, Star of Bethlehem, these different plants, that is so important. And that is the fundamental foundation of why I even started this podcast, is coming into relationship with the plants, of inviting people through myriad different ways to come into direct relationship with the plants. This is so important. This is exactly what the plants are calling us to connect with at this time. And that, like you shared, we all have this knowledge in our DNA, that it's a remembering. It's not even like we need to go out and try and achieve something or prove something. It's an uncovering. It's a remembering of what we already know deeply in the cells of our being. And it is such an interesting time. Like you shared, it is kind of the Wild West, because we don't have these, most of us, unfortunately, don't have these long lineages of direct healing lineages that we are connected with. And so in a way, we're having to relearn how to be connected in this deep way with the plants. And so there's this interesting experience of, remembering it on that cellular level, but then also in that lived experience, having to relearn it. And it's interesting being a modern day witch. I'm curious, is there anything that really comes to mind for you about anything else that you'd want others to know about what it means to really a modern day witch?
I mean, what was just playing in my head while you were sharing is that slow down. Like, we all just need to slow down. And it's slow medicine. We had like the slow food movement. Like, this is slow medicine. This is slow learning. And we're living in a time where everything is so rapid and so fast, and time feels like it's sped up. I think the antidote to that is really slowing down. And I know that, like, both of my teachers, I had a point maybe 5 or 6 years ago where two of my most influential teachers, Rosemary Gladstar and Pam Montgomery, both wrote me separately and said, "Lupo, slow down. You're doing so much. There's so much that you're doing, and you'll burn out." And I did. We had this conversation earlier. So many of us are burning out because we're trying to keep up. But what happens if we all just slow down a little bit? And, my teachers here in the West, like, they did a lot of work to, like, bring herbalism back to, like, put herbalism back on the map, and a lot of work to allow for the first wave feminist movement to take place. And there was just like so much like hard work that had to happen, and so much beauty that did happen. And then my generation, like, I feel like we were on fast forward as well, because that's when it felt like the world just started falling apart. And every day there's a new tragedy to keep up with. And I know that my peers and yourself included, the folks that are doing this herbal work, sometimes it just feels like, how can we do it? We can't even keep up. But I'm hearing right now and feeling right now that, like, there's so many of us on board, and that we have to actually slow down a little bit. We have to really take the time to harness our own inner personal strength, integrity, and power in order to really create this the second wave of feminism that needs to come in order for us to reclaim our rights to our own bodies. And there's so many other layers that I could add to that, as far as protecting the environment and our native plants and people. I think we need to slow down, and perhaps that's just me giving myself my own medicine. But we do end up in a place where we burn out. And none of us are going to be useful to anyone, especially ourselves, if we're burnt out. And I like the idea that there's so many. I kind of even like the idea that there's a wild, wild west, like, I'm a very free-spirited person that kind of likes when things are a little disheveled and like out of order. But as long as we just keep returning to ourselves and slow it down a little bit, I think that this energy collectively could be quite beneficial in the years to come.
Yeah. I really feel that too. Even just looking at the movement of herbalism over this past century, how right now there are so many more different types of herbalists right now than there were even 50 years ago, say, when the herbal revolution was really happening. And so, yeah, it is really incredible, because I think it provides an opportunity for each of us to even more that aspect of what you were saying, of really coming into the integrity of, what unique way are we really being called to work with the plants, that we're really in a time where we can actually truly honor that, which is really, really, really special. That is really incredibly special. And honestly, there have been multiple times in this journey with the plants where I have outwardly expressed gratitude that I can openly be connected and practicing herbal plant medicine and not be persecuted for it. That I'm in a lifetime right now where I can do that. And that is such a gift to not take that for granted, because that connection with the plants, it's so important. It's so special and it's so joyful and it's so needed on the planet right now. So yeah, I just love your work and connection with the plants. And so tell us, how can people find out more about you and your work?
Well, you can always visit us on the web at twinstartribe.com, and all of our handles for social media is Twinstar Tribe. We're located in New Milford, Connecticut, just about an hour outside of New York City in the rolling hills of the Berkshires. It's quite beautiful, so we'd love to have you in person. We are offering lots of classes these days online and also in-person experiences as well. And we do offer a Green Witch series that'll be coming up in October. And it's really walking folks through like how to build upon that powerful energy that is ignited within each one of us and how to grow it and own it, and walking through the elements and also each of the plants that help to support us this healing path. So yeah, we'd love for folks to come visit us, to give us a shout out on social media, or to shop the Apothecary. And we have a fantastic Apothecary, AKA Witch Shop, right? And it feels really good that there's so many beautiful apothecaries in the world right now. And like that, this witchy medicine is just popping up everywhere. So yeah, come see us in person or online. We'd love that.
Amazing. Well, Lupo, thank you so much for joining us today. Just such a joy and honor to have you here.
Oh, thank you. It's always a pleasure. I adore talking to you, and thank you for all the good work that you're doing in the world.
And thanks so much for listening and joining us today on the Plant Spirit Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it, and please follow to subscribe, leave a review, and look forward to seeing you on the next episode.